J. Hill as our presenter this morning. I'm just going to read a little bit about Dr. Hill. Just first of all, he'll be presenting on the topic of intersectionality of financial social work and mental health treatment. Dr. Hill is the chair of the Department of Social Work. He's the graduate program director and an associate professor. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a member of the Academy of Certified Social Workers. Dr. Hill is also certified financial social worker and certified clinical trauma professional. Dr. Hill is an active member of and leader of several professional associations, including the National Association of Social Workers. His research interests include social work and adolescent risk and resilience. Dr. Hill earned his Master of Social Work and PhD in Social Work degrees from Howard University. He earned a graduate certificate in college and university faculty preparation, also from Howard University. And his BA is in speech communications, I didn't know that. And this was from the George Washington University. So please join with me in welcoming Dr. Hill, of course, presenting to the semester.
Thank you, Dr. The best thing about going first, I'm compared to no one, so I'm setting the standard. So I want to talk about one of my passions today, which is financial social work. As Dr. Huggins mentioned, I am a clinical social worker as well. And so I had the opportunity to really integrate my clinical experience with my financial social work experience. All right, so today we're going to dialogue, right? We're going to talk about increasing our understanding of the intersecting of financial social work and traditional mental health services as a way to increase positive outcomes with clients. We're going to understand the plan change process through a financial social worker lens. And we're going to hopefully gain a greater understanding of what exactly financial social work is. So that's a lot to do in an hour, but I need for you to work with, we're going to make this happen, right? Okay. All right, so why is financial social work even important? Well, the number one stressor in people's lives is money, above work, health, and children. Money is a major stressor. Most of us find money to be some source of stress. Can any of you identify with that? Okay, student loans looming. All aspects of life, money is the one area that we can't avoid. We have to rely on it. Not only do we rely on money to meet our basic needs, it's a fundamental aspect of our safety, our security, our quality of life, as well as our aspirations. Just think about it, right? Average debt per credit card, $8,200. Most households have 10 credit cards. I'm a social worker, so I can't do the math that well, but that's a lot of money, right? 8,200 times 10. The average interest rate is 14.48%. That's average. They can go as high as 24%. Almost 60% of American families report difficulty meeting the minimum payment, and it takes at least 25 years to repay the average credit card balance when you only make that monthly payment. So we see why we need to think about finances and how financial social work can help. 43 million Americans are shouldering 1.3 million in student loan debt. 1.3 million. And Americans now have roughly $77.2 billion in outstanding credit card balances. So why financial social work? We just made the case, hopefully, that finances really impact all areas of our life. And it can be a source of stress, and I'm going to talk about in just a second. And so I became a little bit about why I became interested in financial social work. At my previous institution, I had students that would take student loans, particularly in the summer, then drop the courses after they got the refund check. And there's one student did exactly that. She took a full load for the summer, got the refund check, dropped the courses, and bought a car, a used car with a refund check. And so she was my advisee. And we had a conversation around, do you realize how much you're paying for those classes now? So you register for a class, let's say each class was $2,000, and she registered for 4 classes. So that's $8,000 classes that she took loans to pay for. Dropped the courses. Those were required courses. So she had to pick up the courses the following school year. So now those $2,000 courses are now $4,000 courses that she's going to have to pay. And student loans are like taxes and death. You can't write them off. You can't file for bankruptcy to erase your student loan debt. And so, and that was just one story of the students that I was interacting with. And so I wanted to know, how can I help my students understand that the decisions they're making as college students will follow them through the rest of their lives. So I became a certified financial social worker, which is housed in North Carolina in Asheville. The Center for Financial Social Work was started by Rita Wolfson, and she and I have presented together at many conferences. And so I became a certified social worker to be able to help my students understand that the decisions they make around money now as students will follow them throughout their lives. Okay, so what exactly is financial social work? I have several slides to talk about what it is, but at the end of the day, financial social work gets at how we think about money, our money beliefs, influences our behaviors around money, which in turn influence our financial situation. So if we have negative thoughts about money, spend more, save less, we have those negative thoughts, those influences our behavior, which in turn influences our financial situation. So if we have negative thoughts about money, we tend to spend more, save less, which in turn puts us into financial insecurity. So what financial social work does is try to get us to change the way we think about money. So hopefully we'll spend less and save more, which in turn puts us into a better financial situation. And so we want to experience financial security. Any questions so far? So how we think about money influences our behaviors around money, which in turn influences our financial situation. All right, here are some other reasons to justify why we need financial social work. Money is the #1 source, as I stated earlier, of stress among American families. Money is the top most frequently argued topic among couples. #1 cause of divorce, money. Money is the #1, I just said that. Perceptions of financial issues impact the quality of our interpersonal relationships. You can't be booed up if boo ain't got no money, right? All right? Financial strain is associated, this is what I'm going to focus on today, poor health outcomes, particularly mental health outcomes. Perceived financial well-being is a key predictor of overall well-being. So if you think you're okay financially, chances are you think you're okay overall in terms of your mental and physical well-being. There is an association between family financial stress and adolescent problem behavior. Right? So that means the parent's financial situation has a deep impact on the youth in their homes. And economic hardship has a significant negative impact on mental health. So you see, hopefully, we really need to be concerned about finances. How many of you are social work majors? A fair amount of you. Why is it easy, social work majors, for us to talk about sex with our clients than it is to talk about money? It's natural almost for us when we're doing intake to talk about how many sexual partners have you had. We rarely ask, if at all, unless it's eligibility for a program, what's your financial situation? But hopefully I made the point that we really need to begin to do a deeper dive into an individual's financial situation. All right, so some schools that have financial planning programs, they offer counseling classes for their students. Social work programs typically don't offer courses around financial issues. However, we have a responsibility, our core competencies talk about, we have an ethical responsibility, social workers, to advocate for human rights and social and economic justice. So how can we not talk about finances with our clients if we have an ethical responsibility to do so? Right? We have an ethical responsibility to do so. Now, I have some theories why we don't, but we don't have the time. You have to take my course next semester to get at the reasons why we don't, as social workers, really talk about money. But we don't have the time to get into that today. So what I want to do, I want to frame the rest of this conversation in the helping process lens. So as social workers, we begin with what? When we first meet our client, what's that first stage? What do we call it? Now, I know I have some master students in here with some PSWs. So what's that first thing that we do with the client? How do you want to assess them till you know them? That's the second step. What's the first thing we do?
Person in the environment.
That's the framework. Okay. What is that? What is that established report? What is that called? When you're trying to establish rapport with me, what is that called? What are you trying to do?
Relationship building.
It begins with an E. Engagement. You're going to engage me, right? You're going to engage me. So the first step in financial social work, looking through the helping process lens, is engagement. And so in order to engage a client around financial issues, you have to have that self-authentic, non-judgmental, because people are embarrassed. Can you imagine you're $800,000 in debt, and you're coming in talking to your social worker, and you have to say, I'm $800,000 in debt. I bought too many Gucci's and Prada. Right? So there's some embarrassment around having those financial conversations. So as a financial social worker, my role is to be non-judgmental. And part of that engagement process, because I want to build that rapport with the client so we can work around those issues. Ooh, it's getting hot in here. All right. The next thing we want to do, we assess. So I engaged you, right? Now it's time to assess. One of the first things that I do as a financial social worker is to have a client keep a log. And that log is basically everything they spent over the previous week. So they keep their log, identify what they spent, talk about how much they spent. They come in to see me. So we look at that log and say, okay, I want you to categorize wants versus needs. Need is things like house, payment, car payment, insurance. Want is that Starbucks or those red bottoms. You don't need red bottoms, ladies. That's some joking. And so then we have a conversation around, okay, and chances are the wants far outweigh the needs. So we have conversations around, you're spending so much money, most of it is on credit. So you're spending much more than the actual retail price. What if you change that behavior? What is it that propels you to make those purchases? So we have some discussions around that. Can you afford purchases that you make? So that's part of the assessment process and financial social work. There is this inventory that I use because I said earlier in this talk that how we think about money influences our behaviors around money, which in turn influence our financial position. So as a clinician, as a researcher, I need tools. I like tools. I like empirically validated tools. And I found one that's in the public domain that I don't have to pay for when I use it. And it's called the Money Scripts Inventory. And so essentially, the Money Scripts Inventory identifies 4 prevailing beliefs around money. So I give this inventory to the individuals that I work with. And if you take my class, actually if you're in Professor Owen's class today in the field seminar class, we're actually going to complete this survey. So I give this survey out, and there are 4 prevailing beliefs. And so why is it important for me and for the client to identify what their prevailing beliefs around money is? Why is that important? I got it all day. But why is it important to help a client understand what their beliefs around money are? Yes?
So that they can potentially change their behaviors?
So, right, so they can change that behavior. So if they identify, if through this assessment process we identify some negative money beliefs, that gives us a framework to start to tap away, or chip away is a better word, at those negative beliefs and replace them with more positive ones. Okay? So there are 4 types as I talked about, and I don't have time in this session to go through them very thoroughly, but I will mention them. So the first one is money avoidance. And when we think about money avoidance, those are individuals that systematically avoid dealing with their money. And they don't take any personal responsibility. It's not my fault Macy's had those shoes on sale. Macy's know better than that. Or they don't open the credit card bill when it comes in the mail. All right? Money worship, they tend to buy into the notion that the more money you have, the happier they will be. If I were a millionaire, my life would be so much better. How many of you seen those shows of people win the lottery, win all this money, and then they're no better off than before they had the money? Money doesn't change people. Money just amplifies who they are, right? If you were poor and had poor money problems, you have poor behaviors around money, being rich just amplifies that behavior. It doesn't change who you are. It just amplifies who you are. Okay, that's money worship. Money status, those individuals tend to be overly concerned with the notion that their self-worth equals their net worth. That their self-worth equals their net worth. So that goes back to like the Elizabethan poor laws, those social work majors. You know, the whole thing around morality was tied to your worth. So if you were poor, you were amoral. Well, this notion that if I have more money I have, the more worthy I am, the higher my self-esteem should be. And then the last money type is money vigilance. And these people tend to be more watchful, alert, and concerned about their finances. Sometimes overly concerned. Okay. So those are the 4 money types. And so I work with my clients, they complete the survey, we look at their results, and then we have some conversations around what does this mean for you and your situation. And then that gives us in the place, so once we do this assessment, so we've engaged the client, we've done an assessment, we've identified their prevailing money belief. What's the next step? Using the change process. What's the next step? Social workers. What's the next step? Recommendations based on what? So I've assessed you, well, I've engaged you, we've done an assessment, so what's next?
Intervention?
We do some type of intervention, right? Or some type of planning before we do the intervention. So when we think about planning in financial social work, it really is a collaborative effort between the client and the social worker. All right? Because the client is the expert of their situation. They're the expert of how they became so far in debt. Our role is just to facilitate their change process, right? So they're the expert of their situation. We come in with tools that will empower them to change their financial situation. And of course, along the way to provide motivation and support. Okay. So planning, the next step, intervention. And so when we think about financial social work, we look at 5 key areas: your income, your spending, your debt, your savings, and your investment. And as a financial social worker, I begin at step number 2, which is your spending. Because if you get your spending under control, your finances will improve. So we go around, we work around those exercises, identifying wants versus needs. We want to minimize the wants so we can decrease unnecessary spending. So we do a lot of time in stage 2 with regards to our intervention program. All right, so I want to talk about Karen. And this is where I really integrate my clinical skills and my financial social work experience. So I did some work before coming here with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's office in DC. So essentially I talk to dead people. I really didn't talk to dead people, I talk to families of dead people. So the families will come in and I would help them through the identification process. And oftentimes families would come in and they would say, how long do I have to claim the body? That was a red flag for me, right? If I don't claim the body, what happens? So what those clients were really saying, I don't have the money to bury my loved one, right? So in those instances, I connected individuals with resources that the city made available to them. And in some cases, I could tell through my clinical experience that they needed long-term counseling I always sent them to refer them to a clinical social worker because we're the best profession ever, right? And so I referred Karen to a colleague who works with individuals around depression. And through his work with her, he said that she would always come and talk about her money issues. So she had issues dealing with the suicide around the loss of her father and the manner in which he died. That was amplified by her financial issues. So my colleague couldn't really work with her around the depression because the financial problems were so prevalent in her life. So he engaged me to work with her. And so I worked with her specific over eight session period to work specifically around financial issues while she still worked with my colleague around her mental health depression issues. So we use what's called a single subject design. How many of you in research? I mean, talked about single subject, single case design. Okay, social workers. You heard it, you kind of mentioned, somebody mentioned it once in a while. Okay, well, you'll get it eventually. So a single subject design is, we're looking at one person or one case. So we engaged Karen in this single subject design. So we wanted to see if, by engaging with me around financial social work, her mental health treatment outcomes would lessen. That was essentially the research question. So this is typically what a single subject or single case design looks like. So we take some baseline data with the client, that's A. Then we introduce the intervention, which is B. And then we take additional follow-up or baseline data in C. A, so it's AB. Before the intervention, post-intervention. So that's typically what it looks like. So the dependent variables here and the independent variables here. So we wanted to see over time with engaging Karen in financial social work, improve or help to improve her depression scores. So we measured depression looking at the PHQ-9, which is, again, talked about earlier, the importance of empirically validated and reliable scales. So we used this scale, and essentially we took, we measured her depression prior to my intervention, during my intervention, and after my intervention. She still continued to receive traditional mental health services from my colleague. All right, so this is essentially the scale. This is the PHQ-9, and it has 9 questions, hence PHQ 9, that really get at whether or not a person is depressed. And this is a widely used scale. Many health fairs, when they do mental health screenings, this is one of the scales that they typically use. Okay, so this is how it is scored. So from these 9 questions, I'm sorry, going too far. For these 9 questions, you score a score from 0 to 1. And you calculate your scores, so from a 0 to 4, non-depression severity, up to 20 to 27, severe depression severity. Okay? So Karen was usually around moderate or mild before I started working with her. All right, so this is what it looked like for Karen. So you can see she was up at 12 prior to our first intervention. Then around week 9, she started, week 4, session 4, she started to lower around 9. And if you remember from our scale, 9 is mild, but she started in the moderate. So I had some hope that giving her a space to talk about her financial problems really had a positive impact on her mental health treatment. And after several months, we see she was 5 and down to a 4. So using this single subject design, the intersectionality, this is where we're talking about the intersectionality of financial social work with your traditional mental health services to address improved mental health outcomes. Any questions so far? Does this make sense? Why does it make sense? Tell me. I know why it makes sense. So, let me ask you this question. Can I say for certain that it was because we introduced financial social work that her scores dropped? Can I say it was because of the financial social work intervention that her depression scale ratings improved? Why not? I have the data to support it. Why can't I say it was because of the intervention of financial social work? Yes?
Wasn't she saying another colleague?
She was around her depression, but remember, I was engaged primarily because her scores weren't improving. So you engage me and the scores go down. So how can I say it was because of me? Oh, not me, but financial social work that the scores improved. Yes?
Correlation isn't causation.
All right, she's my graduate assistant, y'all. Say it again.
Correlation doesn't equal
Okay,
causation.
see, that's right. There's a relationship, I can say there's a relationship between introducing financial social work, but I can't say that the change was because of, or that the financial social work caused the change. I can say it is a relationship, which is still a pretty good thing, right? So overall, the observations, and I could see that there was a positive relationship between, I was going to wake her up. I saw that there was a relationship between positive mental health outcomes and financial social work. So I could see that relationship. That design told me that. The financial empowerment is related to overall well-being. I started early on in my remarks. The literature talked about that if you feel financially empowered, your perception is that your health is better, your overall well-being is better. Of course, we need to do continuous research to replicate this across different samples. And as my graduate assistant said, that just because there's a correlation, there's a relationship, doesn't mean that the financial social work caused the change in the depression score. And those findings are really limited to Karen. I can't generalize those findings to other people. I can only say that it worked for Karen. And we don't know if Karen stayed the course after her time with me. Okay? So I want to open it up to questions now. We have, I've been talking and my mouth is dry right now, so I really want to open it up to questions to do a deeper dive. This is kind of an overview of what financial social work is and one indication of how I used it. And I want to open it up to see if you have specific questions about financial social work or about how I engage financial social work as a clinical social worker. Any questions? I think I saw you first.
Have you ever had an experiment like this before where there was no change at all?
No. This was the first time that I actually tried to empirically show that financial social work is an effective intervention. And anecdotally, I have a small private practice, AJ Hill Training and Supervision, LLC. Did you get that on tape? AJ Hill Training and Supervision. So I have a small private practice, and so one of my options is financial social work. So I know anecdotally it was working. People were saying, I'm able to save money now, because the key to financial security is you earn your money, you spend a little, you save a little, you invest. Those are the key principles of financial security. And when you take my course next semester, you'll understand in totality what that means. But to answer your question, I know anecdotally that it worked. I know people say it, and myself, I use these principles. I had no credit card debts, none whatsoever. And there's certain strategies that I use that I don't have time to get into today. But maybe I do if you don't ask a lot of questions. I'll talk about it. But no, this was really my first time. Anecdotally it worked, but this is my first attempt at empirically validating that it worked. Good question. I saw anecdotally. Yes.
In my social work class, we were talking about that kind of idea that there's a generational poverty aspect. And so when you take Karen and you speak with her about her financial situation, how does it affect her when she goes back home and then kind of sees where she's at again in her life and that she's a single mother with her children? Like, how do you kind of take her mind out of, like, you are not your poverty?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. I want to answer it first by saying, usually our financial behaviors are mirrored, that we did what our caregivers did in terms of money. We don't think about it consciously or unconsciously. So if I grew up in a household that savings was not a priority or a value, chances are I didn't save, which I didn't. In my household, the grandfather was like, you take care of your family. That's your responsibility, take care of your family. So I took care of my family, but I wasn't at the best financial place I could be. So that's one piece, that this whole notion of generational poverty. I want to challenge that notion. It's not necessarily generational poverty, it's generationally how we think about our finances. And then, of course, we can't change our circumstances, but the beauty about financial social work, it doesn't, you don't have to be at a certain economic status to benefit from it. You start where the client is. So if you are that mother on TANF with 5 mouths to feed, the idea of talking about saving and investment is so foreign to you probably. So, but you can engage that client around how can you spread that TANF payment out? How can you look at your wants and your needs and spread it out? Is it cheaper to go to the farmer's market than go to Publix or to what else do I have here? Publix and Food Lion and what's the one? Harris Teeter. So, how do you you have this limited amount of money to feed the family. How can you maximize that? That's a different level of conversation than saying this is a generational topic. If you have the means, you still have, it's a similar conversation. You want to get to a point that if you have the means to be able to invest, how can you spend less, save more to be able to invest? So it's different, the same strategy but different conversations based on the economic status. Did I answer your question? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So in the case of Karen, did you introduce any budgeting or money management tools to ensure financial stability?
That is a good question. I don't talk about budget. Budget is like saying Dr. Hill, go on a diet. It just don't work. So we don't use budget. I don't use budget in financial social work. I use, the intervention I use is called spending and savings plan.
Okay.
That looks at, it's more flexible than a budget. And there's so many inherent issues with budgeting that I don't really have time to go into. But the spending and savings plan is flexible. It moves with you, if you will. And it looks at your income and your expenses. And you try to, rather than saying I'm budgeting so much for food, it varies per week. So I don't have time to really get into it, but I don't use the word budget. I don't like budget primarily because it's restrictive.
Okay.
The spending and savings plan, I feel, is more flexible and it changes with you. Like say, a budget, you might not budget for going to the movies tonight. Say you and your boo want to go out to a movie, but I can't, baby, it's not in my budget. And the spending and savings plan, you're able to say, okay, I was thinking about spending this much on, I don't know, on gym memberships. I didn't spend that much, so I could take you to the movie, right? So it's flexible, it moves with you, but if you said, okay, this is my budget, and you didn't budget for that movie, you're gonna be like, I can't go to the movie, I didn't budget for it, if you stick to it. Does that make sense? You're looking like, nah, that doesn't make sense.
It makes sense, but like thinking about people who like how she said, like generational poverty, and they have like that mindset of like they weren't raised in a family that saves. So like money isn't that much of a priority. So if you don't have anything to, well, I wouldn't say like I don't want to restrict anyone.
How
But
do
you
we
don't.
know it's not a priority?
Well, true. Okay.
So, but I understand the essence of your question.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you, the first step with financial social work is that the person has identified they have a problem with money, managing their money. So chances are that people who really could benefit, TANF recipients, not picking on TANF recipients, they may not have even thought about, I can say, prior to my teaching, I ran a large agency in Northern Virginia, and we had a basic needs program, essentially, is what it was. And so, and a housing program. And so the clients who were in a housing program were required to pay into an escrow. And the purpose of the escrow account was to allow them to save money to be able to be self-sufficient in their own housing. They really didn't understand the concept of escrow or the importance of saving. And our workers didn't really, they said this is a requirement. So there was no discussion around this. Escrow is really a tool to empower you to get into the habit of being able to save. So if we had TANF recipients that were saving every month to get to a point that they would be able to be self-sufficient, but not having that conversation around why this is important, which was usually the case. It was just, this is our agency's requirement. In order to receive our assistance, you have to pay into this escrow. So we didn't take it to the step further to work with the clients to understand that this is a behavior to help improve your financial situation down the road. And that if you do it, your kids will see you doing it. I don't care if it's 5 cents, $5, but the idea of every month you pay myself first. That's a principle that I talk about in my class, that you have to pay yourself first. And that could be 5 cents, $5. And it can increase as your situation increases. Are you convinced yet?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How long typically would you work with a client doing financial social work?
It depends. It depends. I help them think about their beliefs. Firstly, I'm a clinician, but I never wanted to do long-term therapy. That's just not my thing. And so I don't like to spend a lot of time, because insurance isn't paying for this. People pay me out of their pocket. And I do a lot of group sessions as well. And I give a lot of stuff away as well. But I get them to the point to understanding their beliefs around money, making a plan to change those behaviors. And then once they are satisfied with their plan, then my work is done. And so the clients that I work with that have the means, I refer them oftentimes to a financial planner, which I'm not, and financial social work is not financial planning, and I don't have the qualification to be a financial planner. I know basic stuff around investments and things like that, but that's not my expertise. And a code of ethics talk about, right, practicing your competence. And so when they're at that point that they've gotten their beliefs around money under control and their behaviors, and they're able to save a little bit, and maybe now it's time for them to think about investment, my work is done. And then I refer them out to a financial planner. Yes?
What age do you typically work with? What ages do you typically work with?
Usually adults, but as you can see,
So like 8, like,
this, I typically work with social workers who are in private practice, just because they hear me speaking at conferences and things like that, and they want to get a better hold of their financial situation. But this can work. I mean, if we believe the notion that our financial behaviors we learn them from our parents, social learning theory, we learn our financial behaviors from our primary caregivers, it makes sense to engage youth as young as you possibly can. You know, there are many school programs have, banks for kids, kids' banks and things like that. So I encourage those kinds of behaviors because that's a lifelong behavior. And so if the earlier you can get a kid to start thinking about their finances, the better, in my opinion, because that will follow them through the rest of their lives. Any other questions? Yes?
So I know in my social work policy class, we talked about how if you're receiving TANF, you can't have more than $1,000 in your savings account. So how do you work with your patients on that? Like, 'cause I know if it was me, I'd be more hesitant to save if I wasn't able to receive TANF.
That's an excellent point. That is an excellent point. And that really hits at the core of why social workers need to be involved in policy. Because me, who ran an agency and had to make sure that their clients abided by those TANF requirements, that's a struggle if I'm saying you need to save. We're preparing you to save so you can be self-sufficient. But if you save, you'll be penalized because of the TANF. So it's that you can't get around that. That's why we need social workers in policy positions, right? To say, wait a minute, if you want people to be self-sufficient, they need a nest egg in which to be able to do that. And that's usually what the escrow was, that nest egg. We had it at our agency that they couldn't go over a certain amount in terms of the escrow. And we usually work with them to find a housing that would accept the point that they were at. But your point is really well made. That's an indication how policy really keeps people impoverished. Other questions? No? Sure. How are we, Dr. Huggins?
We're doing good. We have about 15 more minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes. This is free. Yes.
I was just thinking about how powerful this would be if you started at a young age. I know you work with adults, but I'm like, imagine if you had like a inner city school or whatnot, and you actually started in like preschool or elementary just to plant those seeds. I it would be unbelievably powerful.
Well, you're right. We don't typically have these kinds of conversations. In my household, growing up, we didn't have these conversations. We had conversations about what it is to be a man and take care of your home and take care of your family, but we didn't have conversations around, money. That's it. Yes.
So I am an education major. I am currently doing my internship in a 5th grade classroom, and I do like the idea of incorporating financial education at a young age so that students learn those habits early.
Right.
Would you recommend giving explicit instruction on these types of things, maybe doing technology integration, or just kind of embed it in like the classroom procedures?
Right.
So like give them like homework passes and they can use that as like their savings or something like
Right.
that.
There are several literacy programs geared toward school-age kids, particularly elementary school. What I caution is financial literacy alone does not work. Because the behavior is like smoking. I might know smoking is bad for me, but I continue to smoke. So even though I'm bombarded with literature to support why I shouldn't smoke, until I change my thinking about smoking and saying with savings, my behavior won't change. And so I think it's good that they haven't formed those beliefs and habits yet probably at a younger age. So the more we can introduce that financial literacy to kids at a younger age, the better it is. It's a good question. Other questions? Yes.
This is a follow-up question. Are youth in foster care, preparing them to, when they're aging out of the system, they do very basic work with them about budgeting and planning. And most of them, we've seen through the years, tend to have negative outcomes.
Right.
How would you recommend incorporating this into and working with them?
Right. Again, their permanency, that preparing youth who age out, it really is important. Just think about that they have the independence for the first time. And if you haven't had conversations around money, that's going to be a disastrous outcome. In my own experience, when I first started making, pretty decent money, savings wasn't on the top of my list. And because no one really had those conversations with me. So I think it's very important just with her, as soon as you can introduce that content, the importance of saving money and how it's connected to your overall well-being, not just mental but physically, that you're in a better position. So before those youth are beginning to age out, start engaging in those conversations, and not just about it's important to save. I think most of us know that, but have some discussions around about giving thought to what you spend your money on. Don't impulse buy, and if you do, what the consequences. But the idea is not to restrict them, but to make them think about it. Any other questions?
I
Yes.
just want to make a point, talking about the importance of policy serving as an incentive or disincentive to save. In Pennsylvania, I don't know if you heard, very forward thinking, they actually just passed a policy where they provide what is called a CD, a child development account. So once a child is born, they give, I think it's $200, maybe or $200 or $300 for every single child born in Pennsylvania. So right from the get-go, that child is introduced to saving, and then the mother can think about it and reinforce it to the child. So again, policy is really important in creating this mindset or mentality around saving.
How many of you are about to graduate? Okay, one piece of advice, congratulations firstly. One piece of that very first job, if they offer you a 401k or some type of savings plan that they match your contribution, sign up for it. I've heard so many people say, because that's essentially free money, right? And so many of my students from my previous university, I taught the senior seminar class, and I had this conversation, their first job, make sure to sign up for your 401k or whatever matching program that employer has. And so students would say, well, I'm not going to stay there. That's my first job. I'm not going to stay there. But that 401k is free money that you can carry with you when you go into other jobs. And so if you think of it, I wish somebody would share that with me, because my thinking, my first job and my first 401k, I can't remember what it contributed, but it was very small, and the agency matched it. And to this day, it was a long time ago. We don't need to go into how long ago it was. But I still get the interest from those savings, even though I'm not there anymore. And I just think, had I invested more then, I probably wouldn't have to stand here earning the salary today. But I didn't think about it in those terms. And so I want you to think that very first job, whatever job, if they have some type of matching program, 401k, sign up for it, because that's essentially free money that will follow. You can take it to other jobs and to other pension programs or 401ks when you move on. But that's free money that's available to you, so take advantage of it. Any other questions?
Well, if we don't have any more questions, please join me in thanking Dr. Hill for his excellent presentation. Please remember to scan out, and if you did not sign in, there are a couple sheets there, and please sign for